Hello everyone, in this podcast I will describe the true story of the notorious Leonarda Cianciulli, also known as the Soapmaker of Correggio, who was investigated, tried and sentenced for killing 3 women in Correggio, a small country town in northern Italy, between the 18th of December 1939 and the 30th of November 1940. Her case has inspired several movies, theatrical works, articles, YouTube videos, and books, including my last novel, The Soapmaker. She has been one of the most brutal serial killers of all times. According to the inaccurate public belief, she killed her victims to make bars of soap and tea cakes. The true story of her murders, however, is much more astonishing than that. In fact, the case of the Soapmaker can be seen as an intriguing challenge between 2 brilliant women, whose rivalry is very similar to the one between Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty described in Conan Doyle's novels. In our case, the evil genius Professor Moriarty is Leonarda Cianciulli, while the clever detective Sherlock Holmes is Alberta Fenty, sister-in-law of one of the victims. Alberta Fenty, in fact, was the one to carry out a private investigation and to gather the evidence that allowed the initially skeptical Italian police to arrest and indict Leonarda Cianciulli. Leonarda Cianciulli, together with her family, had arrived in Correggio in 1930 from the province of Avellino, in southern Italy, following a terrible earthquake which had devastated the place where they lived. She managed to meet and gain the trust of her victims, Faustina Setti, Francesca Soavi, and Virginia Cacioppo. The 3 poor women, 2 widows and 1 who had never married, all of whom were well over 50, lived alone and had no children. They had no close relatives in Correggio, apart from Virginia Cacioppo's in-laws, and they were quite reserved, introverted women. Their disappearances, therefore, could even pass unnoticed. In any case, they would not cause particular alarm or immediate searches. In addition to being on their own and relatively well off, the 3 victims were also emotionally fragile, rather naive and, for different reasons, dissatisfied with their lives. They all felt that the time left to them to make lives for themselves was short, but they still dreamed of their moments of glory, whether it be marriage, the ever-dreamed job, or a standard of living which would allow an important role in society, all of which life had distanced them from. They were therefore the perfect victims for an unscrupulous killer. Leonarda Cianciulli, a skillful connoisseur of the human spirit and highly skilled manipulator who could boast of acquaintances and contacts around Italy, flattered them, one by one, offering each of them the opportunity to achieve what, deep inside, they were seeking. She then persuaded them to withdraw their savings and sell everything they owned to put together the cash they would need once they reached their destinations. In order to cover her tracks, she told them to tell their neighbors about their intentions to leave, but without giving any precise information about the reasons or destinations. In this way, their sudden disappearances would not raise alarm. In addition, she persuaded them to write postcards to 1 or 2 acquaintances, which she would then arrange to have posted in places which were not the ones they were heading for, and also at a later date. No one knows how she persuaded them to supply her with these incredible alibis. Probably by convincing them that it was the only way not to be found by their relatives. Relatives who were not remotely interested in their happiness but only in their money, who would look for them and use every possible means to compel them to return home where they could keep a closer eye on them, who did not want them to marry or leave their possessions to others, and so on and so forth. Clearly the 3 women never left Correggio. Their dreams came to an abrupt end on the 3rd floor of number 11, Corso Cava, in the flat where Leonarda Cianciulli lived and where they had to go on the day of their departure for the final instructions. Though they were killed by a blow to the head, and robbed of their money and the jewelry they had with them, and their bodies were cut into pieces in order to be disposed of more easily. Living right in the middle of the historical center of the town, the murderer's main problem was in fact how to get rid of the bodies. She almost certainly chopped them into pieces and carried them away a piece at a time, trying not to attract attention. No one knows where they were thrown or buried. What is known, however, is that she also tried to dispose of them by destroying them by chemical means, perhaps boiling them in a solution of water and caustic soda, or covering them with quicklime or in some other way, probably with very little success. It was these attempts, and from what was later written in her diary during the long investigation, that gave rise to the legend of the soap and cakes made from the blood and flour from her victims' bones, which she gave to her guests. But, returning to the facts, in spite of the genius with which she conceived and planned her crimes, not everything went smoothly. Initially, the Correggio Carabinieri did not attach great importance to the reports of the disappearances of the three women who, after all, had publicly announced their intentions to go away, and had even sent postcards to people they knew in the area, writing that they were well. But then the insistence of Miss Cacciopo's sister-in-law and the investigative instinct of Police Commissioner Federico Sirao of the Reggio Emilia Police made a difference. Just a few weeks after the start of the investigation, thanks to some fortunate circumstances, the net tightened around the murderer. Cianciulli was taken into custody as early as the 1st of March 1941 and was arrested on the 29th of April. Convinced the evidence against her was purely circumstantial, at first Leonarda claimed she was innocent. Then, frightened by the involvement of relatives in the investigation and of her eldest son, Giuseppe, being taken into custody, she began to make her first partial admissions, trying, however, to put the greatest blame on other people in the town, of whom she claimed to have been the involuntary accomplice. Finally, she admitted killing the women, thereby letting the others off the hook. After only a few months' investigation, the three murders had a confessed murderer. To avoid execution by firing squad and to try to save her son Giuseppe, who was strongly suspected of being her accomplice, from prison, she then tried to claim madness. She spoke about curses put on her by her mother that had caused the deaths of 13 of her children, about gypsies' prophecies of her terrible destiny, about human sacrifices of innocent souls for propitiatory purposes to save her own children from certain death, and other seemingly delirious ideas. She was consequently subjected to a long period of observation in the Criminal Psychiatric Hospital in Avezzano, and Dr. Filippo Saporito, a leading light in psychiatry and the consultant appointed by the Reggio law courts, ended up by believing her of unsound mind at the time of the crimes. Owing to the war in progress, the trial was not held until 1946. And although many were convinced that she was perfectly aware of what she was doing when she killed the three women, that the motive was purely financial, and that she would have needed the help of her son, Leonarda Cianciulli managed to get herself declared borderline insane and her beloved son Giuseppe freed. This was her final and greatest success. She spent the rest of her life in hospitals for the criminally insane. It was in the last of these, in Pozzuoli, that she died in 1970. Nobody claimed her body and she was buried in a standard unmarked plot. From the minutes taken, trial documents, how the facts unfolded, her psychiatric appraisal at the time, the long diary she wrote in Avezzano, her behavior in court and in front of the famous Italian film director Comencini's TV cameras a few years later, her ability to manipulate her victims and plan her crimes over a period of time, her continuous retractions and lies, modern criminology would form a very different opinion from that of Dr. Saporito. Leonarda Cianciulli, according to recent classifications of such phenomena, would almost certainly be listed among the female serial killers acting for personal gain and power, control-oriented. Evaluated today, her psychopathological profile would not even meet the minimum criteria for a diagnosis of mental disorder in a forensic sense. She would therefore be found to be in full possession of her faculties and sentenced to life imprisonment.